On this episode of FUMO, we are joined by the CEO of Emirates Development Bank, Mr. Ahmed Al Naqbi. We'll be covering various topics from how you can reach out to EDB and take advantage of their infrastructure that's unique from a lending perspective, and having the SEPA agreements where you can also export your technology or goods and services as well. We'd like to give a big shout out to our sponsors Aquanow and XVC, as well as our community partners, the MENA FinTech Association and CFTE.
Ahmed, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure being here.
It's awesome to chat about over the next 40 minutes, 45 minutes, UAE, the development of the UAE, the future of the UAE, and the role your bank plays in this future. Tell us a little bit. Half, three-quarters of our audience are not from the UAE. Tell the audience a little bit about what is EDB.
So Emirates Development Bank, the acronym is EDB, is essentially an entity that is 100% owned by the government of the UAE. So we're AA rated. We're the highest rated financial institution in the country, but in the MENA region also, outside of the supranationals, which I think the IFC is the only one that's out there, and the World Bank, obviously. So we're the highest rated entity in the UAE. What we're here for is specifically to support the development of the country, or the economic development, in key sectors that the government identifies that we want to ensure are being developed here in the UAE. We're focused on 5 key sectors. So we have manufacturing, we have food security, healthcare, advanced technology, and renewables. Those are the 5 key sectors that were identified actually during COVID. So about 5 years ago, that were important and key for the sustainability and resilience of the development of our economy. Of course, everybody knows the UAE historically has been, one of the largest producers of oil and gas. We've had a very strong industry in oil and gas, but the country has really been establishing itself outside of that sector for the last 20 plus years, 25 years. All those sectors, you could really touch on, why they're chosen for the diversification of the country. If we talk about oil and gas to start with, that's why we're focused on renewables.
Sure.
Right? So historically, and this isn't overnight. I mean, the UAE started Masdar in the mid-2000s, I think 2006 or 2007 it was established. To diversify and start, investing in, future technology for energy. Also, the UAE positions itself, we view ourselves not as an oil and gas producer anymore, but as an energy leader. And so that goes across all the different sectors that produce energy in the country and outside the country. Manufacturing is our linchpin for why the bank, focuses on, because post-COVID, leadership of the country identified a silver lining, which was essentially that manufacturing was going to move from, the world is being manufactured in China to having regional hubs. And COVID, demonstrated that you needed to decentralize that centralized hub. The UAE was primed to do that. Because where we are, our location, our infrastructure, our logistics hubs, the safety and security of the country, the great cultural environment that people from all over the world come live here. So it was the natural fit for the UAE to move into manufacturing and to have the manufacturing hub here. Healthcare, direct relation to COVID. You can imagine, the country wants to ensure that we have sustainability and resilience in the production of pharmaceuticals and the production of military equipment, and to ensure that we also fill any gaps with regards to tertiary healthcare providers in the country. So the primary is very well served, but specializations we want to make sure is here. Food security, again, going back to COVID, ensuring that if there's any supply chain disruptions in the future, we have the capability to sustain our own food production in the country, other than, of course, the opportunity to, open up markets and essentially export from the UAE, which is happening now. And advanced technology in food security, the growing of food in agriculture, has allowed us to really do that. And then that last sector that I haven't touched on is advanced technology. When we talk about advanced technology, we're really talking about a component of manufacturing. So we're talking about robotics and automation. Because if the country, which we have been over the last few years, is developing a manufacturing hub here, we are not trying to play catch up. right?
Sure.
The true UAE style. We want exactly to leapfrog and essentially ensure that a manufacturing sector in the country is sustainable for the next 10, 15, 20 years, not something that has to be consistently redesigned and reworked.
So let's double click on that last point you mentioned, advanced technology, because that's sort of what Gaurav and I talk about in our podcast. What do we mean by, you just mentioned briefly robotics, but just give us some more meaning or context around advanced technologies and how does the UAE build in that space? Because you're obviously not just writing loans, you're backing builders, if I can coin a phrase.
And studying them to effectively ensure that they are sustainable, progressive, and will succeed, right? It's not, these aren't VC gut shot type, I imagine, type.
So how does that process work? Do you look at sort of best practice elsewhere? Then you're looking to sort of jump ahead. You don't want to recreate Detroit from the 50s or Shenzhen from the 2010s. You want to do something
absolutely,
bigger and better.
So look, the components of manufacturing is the easy one, right? And this has been very much something that we have been feeling out for the last 3-4 years to get the right fit for what we want and what we need in the country. So when we talk about it as a component of manufacturing, it's quite straightforward, right? So when we work with our manufacturers on their facilities, we look at what are they doing in order to improve their automation, reduce the load on a need for potential labor and workforce. That's where the robotics components come in. And essentially ensure that factory, as I mentioned, is future-proofed to as much as they can with what they have available to them. We also look that automation and the robotics, as much as possible, is created here in the UAE. Now, it doesn't mean that every component is created here in the UAE. A lot of it is assembled from all over the world. But there are players in the market today, people would be shocked, who can produce best-in-class robots for the automation that is very specific to that factory. And there's a few of them out in Jafza. You'd be surprised. There's also setting up out of Kizad. So this is from talking about a component of manufacturing. The other part of advanced technology, which the UAE is essentially a leader in the world, is artificial intelligence. There's two obvious leaders in the world, which is the US and China. The third one people don't talk about much, and I'm happy that's the case because we're kind of flying under the radar on this, is the UAE. So the United Arab Emirates is actually a global leader in the development of artificial intelligence. With its own proprietary technology and its own proprietary code, right? That's another element that people, don't necessarily know about or not necessarily that focused. But the UAE is definitely driving in that direction. So how does EDB play in that sphere to support that? So when we say advanced technology, again, it's a very broad term, but we've kind of limited it or defined it a little bit towards certain components of advanced technology. So on that, it's one, the development of data centers. So Emirates Development Bank has been behind the financing of every major data center in the country over the last 4 years, whether that be in Abu Dhabi, whether that be in Dubai, whether that be in Sharjah, whether that be across the Emirates, essentially. I won't touch on a couple of the sensitive projects that are in play today, but I can tell you that what you read in the headlines today, post the visit of the U.S. president to the United Arab Emirates, the infrastructure that's behind that's going to be set up in the UAE in many, many ways is also being supported and financed through the Emirates Development Bank. So that's another area that we play in advanced technology. The third one that we're kind of opening up now, we're just dipping our toes into it, is the actual software development. So when we talk about artificial intelligence. But we have certain limitations, right? So we need to ensure that the IP is in the UAE. We need to ensure that the actual coders or programmers are here in the UAE. And we need to ensure that the people that are backing it are credible. I'm not saying that we go for any entrepreneur startup in that space, right? But we look for well-backed, strong players who are seriously developing in that space and that technology. And we do fund them.
It's really interesting what you said about UAE flies below the radar, because I was just looking up on my smartphone there, and I was just trying to find the episode of another podcast.
Where we talked about this in particular.
We talked about this, didn't we?
We did.
I don't want to give shout outs to other podcasts, but a dear college friend of mine has a podcast called Exponential View, which he runs out of London. And he had a guest, a US professor on, and Azim is based in London and his guest was based in the US. And we're talking about this exact question, global hubs in AI. And so they started with the US, China, kind of duopoly. And then Professor Cowan said UAE. And it's a really interesting episode, just to give a sort of external, non-UAE based.
There are a lot of people who are very, very, very aware, and very surprised.
If they're in the space,
if
they're in the space,
outside that space,
exactly,
very limited.
I think if you're in raising capital for AI or emerging tech, or building in this space
and utilizing it,
or actually developing models, so it could be anywhere from the kind of the model side to the capital.
You have
side.
to be in the sphere.
I think they're aware, but then more if they listen to the general reader of the New York Times
No.
CNN, watcher of CNN,
no exposure.
You probably don't realize just how much is being built. And
Which is why they listen to Fumo, right?
Good plug for Fumo. Gary, you've been involved. Can I share that?
I don't know. We can. We can't.
So tell us a little bit about how you guys know each other and your kind of involvement in
our previous worlds and my current world have overlapped from luckily a friendship perspective and also just an intellectual perspective on hypothesizing how things can work best for different ecosystems, right? And we always look at as challenges in the future as opportunities waiting to be problem solved, right? And if you put good people together, you really can do this. And so I think from our relationship and understanding, we generally like problem solving or discussing opportunities that are waiting to be created. And I have different perspectives. Ahmed has his own perspective, so it's always given rise to different conversations. So some of them are things that happen on their own, and some of the things happen from a conversation. So that's where our backgrounds have met previously and still interact to some degree today, but I'm very privileged to be a long-time UAE resident that has good friends where we first met through other people in the Emirati community. So that's where our background is. So we worked on different concepts or things and thought processes before as well.
Absolutely.
So it's been fun,
Gaurav is my go-to person when it comes to the startup community, when it comes to a lot of the future space that's being developed in the country. I think Gaurav's very plugged into that.
Right.
So it's been interesting. I have to say, as a person that's a long-time resident of the UAE, I hadn't really heard much about EDB before.
Born and brought up in the UAE.
But I didn't have much exposure to it, I'll be honest. I think media, communications, I think today is very different to how it was. And I think what EDB is doing after Ahmed has joined is... I was also very mature now in that time and space, also more relevant in my understanding of the ecosystem to even have a conversation with him, right? If I was just sitting in my office doing Marshall FinTech Partners, it would be a different conversation. I wouldn't be able to have much insight or contribution, but learning about where EDB was an institution and what it was doing, what it is doing today, just hearing the opening part of this conversation, I have to say, how cool. I have to say, how very cool, because from a standard organization platform to what EDB is doing today that people can touch upon, interact with, and benefit from, in an ecosystem where we're always importing. I remember a key fact and figure with data that was available to the public, right? And there's a lot of more data you'll have privileged access to than I can as a civilian, right, in any way, shape, or form, is that the UAE has always been an importer. We only exported. But today, and we've talked about this, right, with blockchain, with crypto, with AI, the export capability of the UAE on that sector alone is one thing, but now what else can we export or do from a hub perspective? It's really exciting. It's really exciting. So, I think we've talked about other projects as well. We've talked about the electrification of certain areas, right, with ecosystems that are happening with vehicles and everything else. It's very interesting times.
You know, I love Emirates Development Bank because in many ways it embodies the values of the country. And what I mean by that is the country is quite young, right? It's a young country, founded in 1971. And we've had, alhamdulillah, a set of very progressive leadership that has been very proactive in the planning. And so in a relatively short period of time, what you can see very clearly is a clear vision and serious execution, right? So a lot of times around the world, without picking on any specific country, but you know, you might have, you know, the announcement of objectives and goals and vision and so on, but it kind of fizzles out when it comes to the actual practical application, or let's say the serious support to make it a reality. What we've seen in the UAE time and again is that there's always serious execution behind the objectives and the goals. And that's why you can see that, you know, generally speaking, in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, the country has been consistently advancing and consistently making, let's say, the best out of the situation that we're presented with, whether it's locally or globally. And that's not a small thing, right? You could say one time was a fluke. But when there's a sequence of events over 20, 25 years, and every time, alhamdulillah, that the country comes out of it stronger, better, you know, the positioning is even better than it was before facing that challenge, shows you that there is very intelligent leadership with very clear vision, and then the insistence of the execution on the objectives behind it, right? So it's not just, you know, we'll see what happens. No, this is the objective, and we're going to make sure it happens. Doesn't mean that we're not going to face challenges along the way, but we're going to treat those challenges seriously. We're going to find the ways to get around them and to fix them and essentially come out the other side stronger. And so when I say the bank reflects those values, I really mean that because in a sense, you know, the bank was also founded in the late 70s. And it was originally two separate banks. It was an industrial bank and there was a real estate bank. Post the economic crisis of 2008, 2009, they merged the two. They used the balance sheet of the real estate bank for the industrial bank. When the bank, that merge got done in 2014, the real estate bank remained active and the industrial bank essentially went dormant. And then COVID happened. And so everything I just described or explained was, okay, during COVID, cabinet leadership, we have this entity. It's not being utilized. It should be utilized because we should be sparking. Imagine in the thick of COVID, when everybody is around the world, you know, facing all these challenges and, you know, having all of these issues, and, you know, yes, we're dealing with that challenge in the moment, but our leadership had the foresight to also say, okay, well, how can we come out of this better and stronger? And EDB is one component, obviously. There's many, many components that go into that. But one of the things that came out of that was we need a development bank that's focused on the development of the industrial base of the country and key sectors. And they made it a reality. They formed, and when I say they made it a reality, they formed ministries, right? Yeah. So, you know, we're talking about AI. You had a ministry of AI that was created. You had
first in the world, right?
Right, it was the first in the world. During COVID, you had the Ministry of Industry and Advanced Technology created. His Excellency Dr. Sultan Jaber was the chairman, and he was given EDB. So he's the chairman of EDB. So he's the minister and the chairman of EDB. All of this came through COVID. You also had a ministry that was created, which was the Ministry of Foreign Trade, right? Which was just recently made into its own standalone ministry, but it was placed under the Ministry of Economy. I'm pointing this out because what I'm trying to point out is that there's multiple facets to a plan that were all being created independently to come together, which is now what is happening in front of our own eyes. So the SEPA agreements were running in parallel, right, through the Ministry of Foreign Trade. And of course, there's other, you know, portfolios that are being handled at the same time. And Emirates Development Bank, when they brought me in to head it, my job was, okay, fix the legacy, clean it up, and build the new bank, right? And all of this was being done in parallel to get to the point where we are now, which is there's enough support coming through entities like EDB and others out there in order to enact and make effective SEPA agreements, free trade agreements with the various countries that the country has signed with. And so what you end up with is now, when I have a conversation with Ambassador X or Y in country X or Y, yeah, okay, you have an industrial base in that country that wants to benefit from the environment of the UAE. I can provide the financing, right? So it gives it teeth. It's not just words. It's not just come to the country, we're a nice place to set up, low tax environment. Okay, that's all great.
Yeah.
We will actually put money behind that project, right, to come to the UAE and set up and establish in the country. So it shows you how good leadership can formulate plans across multiple fields to come together in years, right? And our plan actually runs to 2031 with Project 300 billion. But there's a few others that are aligned all to these plans. You have the Ministry of Investments, which was set up. You have the Ministry of Foreign Trade, which was set up. You have the Ministry of Industry and Advanced Technology, which was set up. All of these were set up post-COVID, and there's reasons for that. Right?
Yeah.
And they all come together to formulate what we have today, which is a promise from our leadership that the country, inshallah, will always be stable, secure, and one of our top priorities is economic prosperity, and ensuring that the quality of life of this country is always for future generations established in a way that we have that comfort, so to speak, right? Yeah.
I think there's no doubt that that path is evident with the massive growth in population and hedge funds and different industries from all over the world coming to set up in the UAE as their headquarters, not a branch, right?
All independent components of the same plan.
Unbelievable.
So what ADGM is doing out in Abu Dhabi, and they've been massively successful in attracting foreign capital to come establish, as you mentioned, with the hedge funds. The only place outside of probably London and New York that has really, really managed to establish that kind of foothold.
The growth is
and this is early days, by the way.
I know.
What we're talking about today is like the early movers, right? The interest that we consistently see from, let's say, others in that industry, because you have the different tiers of hedge funds and so on. So now you're hearing from mid-sized and smaller players who typically wouldn't operate outside of a certain region are now actually thinking about setting up in the UAE, other than the major global funds. The IFC massively successful in attracting those pools of capital to come and establish presence out of their jurisdiction. And again, like I say, it's different components of the same objective and the same vision for the country.
I think, stepping sideways from that for a second, this is all, I think this is evident, and people are seeing this very easily. It's very obvious to recognize this. What's obvious to me, but I don't think is obvious to people who are listening to this podcast, and I think it's very important to, is something you talked about, but I think I'd love for you to share a little bit more with our listeners, is about the SEPA agreements, right? And I'd love for you to also talk about what that does. For example, I know about the Make in Emirates program, and I know about the SEPA agreements because I'm looking at it. And again, because I don't think everyone else is aware of this, and our listeners may genuinely be interested in this, I'd love for you to tell people more about the SEPA agreements, the benefits, and this Make in Emirates program, and how you're involved in what you're doing, because there are a lot of people who I think will be surprised to hear about the benefits of these programs and what it actually does, and possibly even reach out to take advantage of these things.
Sure, because I think sometimes people who don't know and don't work or live here or interact with the UAE think we're all about oil or tourism.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they also only think, Ronit, you're absolutely right. They also only think perhaps there's a little bit of the venture capital and startup ecosystem. They're not as exposed to what we're talking about here today. So if you can share more of that, that's fantastic, because we deal with people and
absolutely
in diplomatic offices or trade offices and things and family offices.
Yeah, I mean, historically, the countries, as we just mentioned, we're known as an oil and gas producer, and then more recently, let's say in the last 20 years, as a tourism hub, right? And then basically a lot of what we're talking about now, we've been planning as a country for it for the last 10, 15, 20 years, but the fruits of that labor has started to show post-COVID, right? So whether it's the startup ecosystem that you're talking about with the venture capital piece, whether it's the pools of capital that have been coming in, making the UAE like the capital of capitals, right? Abu Dhabi is the capital of capital.
I love that
in many ways, right? Yeah, it's a great one, right? Or the renewables and being a leader in the renewables space and the renewables sector, the AI space and being a leader in the AI space, a manufacturing hub for the region. All of these things, are things that we're not as well known for, but the fruits of that labor is starting to show now, and I believe the UAE will become on the map for those items probably in the next 5 to 10 years. Given that we're just now kind of let's say reaping the benefit of the plans that were put in place years ago. So if we're talking about the development ecosystem?
The SEPA agreements and the Make in Emirates program.
Sure, the Make in Emirates.
That, right?
We're talking about the SEPA agreement. So just for anybody that's not familiar with the SEPA agreement, SEPA stands for Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. What it is, it's a bilateral trade agreement, essentially, but it covers multiple sectors. It can cover healthcare, it can cover tourism, it can cover, manufacturing, trade between those two countries. Very broad. The UAE has been negotiating successfully these agreements over the last 5 years. You can go to the website of the Ministry of Investments or the Ministry of Foreign Trade. The Ministry of Economy, I believe, would have them up as well. They have successfully negotiated multiple agreements with countries in Southeast Asia. So you have Malaysia and Cambodia.
It's a large amount, isn't it? It's
Indonesia.
like 50, 60 countries or more.
They have a list. I think it's well over 40 countries. I think they've signed so far with probably close to 15 to 20, right, successively. You have South America, countries like Colombia, Chile. I believe Uruguay and Paraguay are on that list as well. There's others. You have Central Asia, so you have countries like Kazakhstan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia. You, of course, have African countries, so Kenya, and Uganda, and multiple others. And then they're currently in the process, as we speak right now, of negotiating it with the EU. You also have with the Australasian countries, so New Zealand and Australia. Australia, I think, is being finished up as we speak. I believe China, obviously, is on that list. There's South Korea. Wow. Essentially, all of these, global hubs, whether they're manufacturing hubs or whether they're, some kind of, producers, or they have a strong base for absorption of our products.
We call offtake almost, kind of, right?
Yeah. So they have been successfully negotiating these agreements for many, many years. And the value and the benefit is that any company that decides to put a branch or move their production to the UAE completely gets the full value and benefit of those SEPA agreements. So on face value, when people, again, this is what I mean, that this all completes a plan, right? On face value, when people look at, should I set up a manufacturing base or plant in the UAE? Why would I do that? Right? It's a relatively small population. Okay, everything I just said, right? Fantastic quality of living, great ports and infrastructure, tax benefits. But in the end, how many people can I really sell to, right? Yeah. If there's less than 10 million people living in the country. Okay, fine, they have access to the GCC market. Yeah. Okay, that gives you, another 20, 30 million? Maybe, maybe not. But with SEPA, you end up with access to hundreds of millions. I forgot Egypt, by the way, is another one in Africa that there's with hundreds of millions. You probably, once inshallah they're done with SEPA, I don't know the exact number, but it would not surprise me if there's access to over 1 billion people. Sure. And the countries and the markets.
Southeast Asia and South Asia.
Alone.
Egypt on its own is 100 million.
That's 100 million. Indonesia, the EU, right?
Wow.
Oh, how could I forget this? India signed a SEPA agreement. That's already 1.5 billion, 1.6
billion. 2 billion.
We're beyond the threshold of having economic credibility.
And Egypt alone
you're done over 2 billion.
Yeah. Almost 2 billion. Yeah.
So imagine you're established out of the UAE. Yeah. You have your base out of the UAE and you're manufacturing out of the UAE with the prime access to these fantastic ports, fantastic logistics, with very clear understanding of law, with a very business-friendly environment from the government, with, like you said, very low tax rates, with quality of life and security, all based out of here.
So we're looking at even potentially Sharia-compliant businesses that might be beneficial of setting up here and taking advantage of the ecosystem and what you're providing.
Absolutely. I mean, EDB in many ways, we work on a transaction-by-transaction basis. So we build bespoke solutions. I actually call us a boutique. We're very much specialized as a development bank. We're not kind of the mass, large commercial entity that is kind of has very specific segments and sectors, and then at the same time, have very specific products. Our solutions are very much tailor-made depending on the transaction. We focus on two things. Obviously, the credit worthiness, right? So we are a bank at the end of the day. We ensure to do proper credit underwriting for any transaction that we end up financing.
Of course.
But the second component, which is different than commercial banks, is we have our own economic impact scoring. We developed this as a proprietary tool that we have in the organization. We look at qualitative and quantitative fields that assess a transaction's economic value to the country. And then based on the score, which is a weighted average, the higher the score, the more likely we're going to give them longer tenors, or the more likely we're going to give them certain grace periods, maybe some flexibility on pricing. But they end up with a deal that is very much structured and tailored for the success of the transaction. The difference between us and commercial banks is we're not trying to extract the greatest value for shareholders. We have one shareholder, which is the federal government. The value for the federal government is the economic impact.
Yes,
so for us, what matters is that if we want this transaction, we want to finance it, how do we ensure that the financing is not a burden, but rather it's there to make sure they succeed? And that's how we really tailor make our solutions. So many times it is Sharia compliant if that's what the client or customer is looking for.
And it's so interesting. You can't do that in many countries around the world because the leadership tenure in this country that's entrusted to the people that are working with the people to deliver the results on that don't change every 3 to 5 years, typically, like you do in electoral states. So it's hyper interesting to see that if we didn't have that governance, we wouldn't. I don't think you'd be able to affect different parameter adoption for traditionally financial institutions to not look at a different kind of outlook or parameter of success to drive these sorts of programs. Super interesting. Super interesting.
Absolutely.
So just to extend that theme, what kind of companies or institutions should reach out to you, Ahmed? Are there sort of specific fits or types of people, or maybe there are institutions that haven't historically, approached you that you'd want? They're hopefully listening to this podcast. You say, "Hey guys, don't forget us. We can actually be helpful to your journey."
So look, I'll touch on the segments that we support, and then that way the clients can probably figure out, which one best fits them. Because we support everyone from micro all the way to large corporates. On the micro side, so the smaller entrepreneurs and their startups, financing is actually a burden. So we don't give financing to small startups, but we support them from a transactional banking and a learning perspective. From a transactional banking, we have our EDB 360 digital platform. Anybody can download this. It's free to use. There's no monthly fees. There's no minimum balance charges. It is essentially access to the financial system of the UAE. You can open up an account using UAE Pass. You can have your account up and running in under 24 hours. So as an entrepreneur, we know that this is one of the biggest difficulties or challenges they face because they don't have a track record, right?
Yeah.
But if you're present in the UAE, you have a UAE Pass, you can open up an account basically in under 24 hours.
This is for banking for entrepreneurs.
For entrepreneurs, right?
That's a real pain point,
Absolutely,
right? Opening
absolutely.
bank accounts.
And this platform, I'll touch on it for a second because I really, it's unique. I don't consider it mobile banking. One component is the transactional banking of mobile banking. It's actually split into 5 components. The second component is the fintech partners, right? So when we built this, when we launched this, one of the things that I told the team was, look, we're not trying to replicate what commercial banks do. They have a reason, right? They have a captive audience, and they don't want to share that wallet with others, that share of wallet. I'm like, again, we're a development bank. We're here to enable them. If there's fintechs out there that can provide better, faster, cheaper services to the entrepreneur, let's partner with them. Let's bring them on the platform. So there's a whole section, which is our partner services, to offer them services like your wage protection system, your insurance, your VAT calculation, anything that is value add, your invoice discounting, any way that we can support the entrepreneur. And we act as the gatekeeper to make sure that the fintech is well vetted, that they have the right, charges, they're not, price gouging, so but we bring them on the platform. That's the second pillar. The third pillar is learning. We have 2 accelerator programs ourselves. So we have one for manufacturing and we have one for agri-tech. And then, we're partnered with the likes of the Emirates Institute for Banking and Financial Services, EIBFS, any others that we feel will add value to an entrepreneur. Again, a lot of times what entrepreneurs struggle with, we figure as a bank, our niche is to try to upskill them when it comes to financial services, to understand the language of banks and the working of banks. Because it doesn't necessarily mean that they should be getting financing from us. Maybe they go to the commercial banks, but how do they have the conversation with the commercial banks? what are the commercial banks looking for? So when they go in there, they're fully prepared, and they know how to talk to them to make sure that they get the financing they need. So there's a learning aspect on our platform as well. The fourth one is funding. So just because they can't get financing from us doesn't mean they shouldn't have access to the various funds out there that are willing to fund small startup community. So we look for partners that we can put onto that platform. We have our own growth fund, which we launched a couple of months ago, which is focused on equity. So that's the fourth component, is how to get them funding. The fifth component, which is just a value-added service that I talked to the team about and we got it up and running. We converted our call center into a concierge service, but a concierge service that is specific for entrepreneurs. So an entrepreneur can go on the app and then just click the concierge button and it'll reach our contact center. If they can answer the question for them, they'll answer the question. But there's lots of questions that we can't answer. What free zone should I establish in? What are the tax laws? What is this? What is that? But EDB has partners all over the country on the federal level, the local level, the private level. So we tell them, look, we'll get back to you in 24 to 48 hours with the answer. I want to know how to set up my business in Fujairah.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll contact the Chamber of Commerce or we'll contact the Department of Economic Development and we'll come back to them. So again, as an entrepreneur, it's that value add that EDB can give that entrepreneur, because it's not always about, can you give me a loan?
Yeah.
It's a lot of times the entrepreneur just doesn't know how to calculate their tax, or doesn't know which free zone to set up in, or doesn't know, onshore, offshore, what do they do? So we will support them with that. So that's on the micro side. Once you start going up to the small, mid, and large caps, the type of clients that we're looking for really range, right? So I touched on the 5 key sectors. Anybody around the world can come and talk to us about financing. But where I've found is the easiest from a credit perspective is those that have some kind of trading business on the ground and they're trying to vertically integrate, because there's established financials, there's audited financials. They understand the market, so the feasibility study becomes very easy. Right. So if I'm already selling my products in the UAE or through the UAE, re-export through the UAE, but now I want to vertically integrate, I want to put my actual manufacturing or assembly facility in the UAE, they're the easiest to have the conversation with, because they understand the market, they have the financials and the numbers, and then it's just a matter of, okay, well, instead of producing out of country X, my funnel to get this product into the region is going to come from this factory on the ground in the UAE. And that becomes an easy conversation. Then, of course, the value and the benefit for them, like we were talking about earlier, is the access to not just the UAE and GCC market, but the access to the SEPA markets. Right. So the re-export. They might produce 10% goes into the UAE and GCC market, and we have clients that 90% is re-exported out. So imagine the volume of production in the UAE. They only need 10% for the local country. 90% is going to Europe and Southeast Asia, North America. And again, the UAE, with these SEPA agreements, has created this low tax environment for anybody that wants to come and establish here.
Looking ahead, 2030, we're 5 years away. 5 years will go fast. What does EDB look like in 2030 or even 2035 if you go more science fiction? Because 5 years is just like, we'll just wake up and it'll be 2030, right? Which is scary in a way. But what does it look like, 2030, 2035, EDB?
It's funny enough, we're coming up to the end of our 5-year mandate in 2026. And alhamdulillah, we've been quite successful. I've been having the conversation with the directors. They're asking me, okay, what do we do next? Where do we go about? And so we're having a debate. Do we look at a plan that is a longer tenure plan, that is 5 to 7 years, or do we look at a shorter tenure plan? Our first mandate was 5 years.
Right.
And the reason why we're thinking potentially going on a shorter tenure is just, having very clear objectives that we commit to, that we ensure are delivered.
Right.
And with the fast pace of the world, this isn't 1985 anymore, right? Yeah. Or 1990 or 95 or even 2000, where you can kind of expect the world to be in a certain place 5 years down the road, right? Sure. The way things move today with the advance of technology, with everything that's happening geopolitically, we might believe that it's more meaningful to have a 5-year or 7-year vision, but potentially 3-year objectives, and then pivot, right? So we like to pivot. We don't like to just be stubborn. When we see what's happening on the ground and we're very close to it, we immediately try to serve whatever gaps we see. So we're thinking more of like a 3-year. But to answer your question directly, the sectors that we've been focused on, we think we're going to expand into them further.
Okay.
We're going to flesh out technology more, so advanced technology in specific. We're looking at that in more detail. So like I said, we were very kind of picky on what we do. So the data centers on the infrastructure, some of the software component, but as long as the IP is local to the UAE and the developers are in the UAE, and then advanced technology as a component of manufacturing. So we might broaden that a little bit more. We might look at some other sectors that we also believe the country is moving in. So, your logistics, you might talk about, some of these future space of like the flying taxis that are being here, some of these other elements, other future technologies that come in. So again, the technology space, we believe, and by the way, when we say these sectors, they are running across other sectors as well.
Sure.
They're not necessarily specific, to one sector. Advanced technology can be components of multiple sectors. So we're looking really at how to broaden that. We're doing quite well when it comes to manufacturing. We're doing quite well, I believe, when we're talking about renewables, healthcare. The advanced technology one is the one that we really want to tap into further.
Right. It's that time of the year we start talking about flying taxis.
It's coming.
It's
December.
Yeah. They did the first
test
a week ago, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So
did you watch the Jetsons when you were younger?
of course.
The flying.
How could you not?
Expect EDB to play a significant role
in those flying
taxis.
Or,
wow.
Yeah. Maybe not that specific
Can you
one.
imagine Sheikh Zayed Road?
It's going to be
how manic it's going to be.
Star Trek is a reality, right? Jetsons, everything. Unbelievable.
The last question to wrap up our conversation, if you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about yourself, professionally, who you are, the man that you are. What prepared you for, you've been now CEO for 4 years.
Right.
What prepared you for that role? Tell us a little bit about your background as in banking or finance, and what did you not know when you were a young Turk in your 20s that you know now, and where do you see yourself? And this sounds like an interview question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? It just sounds like a terrible interview.
I don't know about 5 years' time, but I think I can definitely talk to you guys about the background.
Yeah.
So I love my job, and I really feel like I was built for this, and I'll tell you why. Even since my childhood, one, I'm incredibly globalized, and what I mean by that is I grew up in a lot of different places, right? So I spent a lot of years in the States. I spent years in Paris.
Yeah.
I actually didn't come back and live in the UAE till I finished university. So I was around 2004, 2005.
Oh, wow.
Right?
So the first 20
odd
years
was basically
all over the world.
I was all over the world. Right. And that builds a bit of grit, a bit of resilience.
Sure.
One, an understanding of what is really out there. And two, a real passion for my country and wanting my country to be the best.
Yeah.
Right. I've seen the evolution and the growth from those years, from 2005 till today. And why I'm saying that it's never by chance, right? There's always intelligent leadership that is directing multiple things in order to take us to that vision of where we were in 2005 to where we are now in 2025. Right?
Yeah.
So that's one component of it. What I noticed and how that fed in was when I started in banking in 2005. I was the guy, until today, you see some people, but very, very few people that are like this. I was the guy that found the gaps in products, that found the gaps in businesses and processes. And then I wasn't just the guy that found the gap, but I was the guy that came up with the solution. And then I wasn't just the guy that came up with the solution, but I was the guy that at 23 or 24 would go all the way up to the CEO and the board and convince them to give me a budget and people to put the solution in place. Sometimes I look back at that and I was like, I was crazy. I was like, I didn't have a filter, I guess, maybe because I spent so much time in the States, right?
Call it passionate.
Right? Or passion, right?
You call it passionate.
But I mean, literally from within weeks of being, so I spent many years at the National Bank of Italy. From within weeks of being there, and credit to them and to their leadership, they were supportive of a young Emirati that had, bold ideas at the time, and like I said, would identify gaps, and I built businesses around it. And some of these businesses exist till today. And have really grown into something massive over time. I'm talking about, I'd created solutions for the wage protection system before that even became a thing in 2008, 2009 with the Ministry of Labor and with the central bank. And that made it massively successful because the product was there ready as soon as that became law with the Ministry of Labor and with the central bank. Until today, that's one of the largest segments that FAB, which was legacy NBAD,
Sure.
cater to. One of the businesses that I built for them had about 4 million clients or customers. We built multiple solutions on the digital front. We built multiple solutions, whether it was on eDirham, whether it was the first mobile application for a bank, just businesses across the board there. And the first innovation lab in a bank I'd formed. I'd worked in corporate banking. I won't go into the details
Sure.
of everything, but I'd worked in corporate credit and corporate banking. They had asked me during the merge of FGB and NBAD to handle the distribution. So that was essentially all the physical space, right? So the actual branches, ATMs, contact centers, and all that kind of stuff. Treasury investments. Long story short, by the time I got to EDB, there were two things. One, I understood how a bank worked inside and out.
Right.
So I understood the tool, how the tool is formed and created.
Yeah.
Two, I already had this passion for creating things, right? So I could transform and I could create. And that was something that came over 20 years with that bank. Lastly, which was, I think, the most important piece, I was tired of working in a commercial bank where the only thing that mattered was the bottom line, where it was just from year to year. We made X amount last year, we need to make X amount plus 5%.
Right.
The year after, we made X amount plus 5%, now we need to make X amount plus 7%.
Sure.
After a while, I started questioning myself, and am I actually using my skill set, my knowledge for, making a little bit more profit?
Yeah.
Okay, and there's nothing wrong with that, and I've done it for many years, but I wanted something more. So when I was presented with this opportunity, it was transform the legacy, build something new, and at the same time, it was something that had benefit for the common good, so to speak. As cheesy as that sounds, right? Right, but the country and the people, and really, building something that could be impactful in people's lives. And I translate that. I'll leave you with just one small thing, but essentially, having those skill sets honed over many years, and then having that kind of moral compass and wanting to be fulfilled in that way. That's why I mean that I was very lucky and I love my job. And I leave you with just a small element. My favorite thing that I do in all of this is visiting those factories and those companies on the ground. I feel like I'm a kid again in high school or in middle school or in elementary. When you do the field visits, the field trips.
Those are my favorite.
Right?
Charlie and the Chocolate
Yeah,
Factory.
exactly.
I still love doing
I
those.
feel like I'm on a field trip.
I love those.
And what I love and what I can see, and actually relating back to the question you asked me earlier, what I could tell you is this country's quality of life is only going to keep improving over time. And I don't mean that just as an optimistic view.
Sure.
I mean that on the granular level, because I'm in these factories and I see them making components, right? And as simple as silly as something that is the water pipe that goes into your house, into your drainage. And before, it's imported. And in order for the cost to be, at this certain level, you have to get the lower quality, that goes into. But you wouldn't know this because I'm not a contractor. I wouldn't know this, right? And I don't know. But then when I'm in the factory, I'm watching, and the factory owner is explaining to me that, he used to import this, but now he makes it here. And because he makes it here, he has the ability to make it as a higher quality product from the ones that come from countries that produce high quality products. Because he can, for example, on this pipe, put a double lip of rubber, which therefore reduces leaks by 80%. Whereas typically what you'll have in most homes is the cheaper version, which you'll have, much higher rate of leaks. So why is that important? It sounds so insignificant, but it's important because if you're making it at a cheaper price or at the same price of the cheaper import, and now this is what's going to go into everyone's building and everyone's home, all of a sudden 5-10 years from now, your quality of life is going to be significantly better. I used the example of one thing, a pipe. But think about how many times you're annoyed when you're walking around your house and, oh my God, there's another leak in the bathroom. There's a leak in the kitchen. There's a leak here. And then you have to call someone. And then someone has to come fix it. And then you got time that you know. So multiply that by hundreds, if not thousands of components that are being now locally manufactured and locally built. Put the sum of all that together and then expect the quality of your life to be at a much higher level. These are, let's say, the things that people are you don't necessarily notice, right? But they're in the workings and infrastructure of your day-to-day life. And I am privileged enough to see how they are built and where they come from. And what I'm saying, my prediction is 5-10 years from now, these things are going to be, the quality of the life in the UAE is only going to get even better. So what I'm saying is, one, our future is very bright. Two, I'm in an incredibly privileged position. And EDB has really opened my eyes to all of this.
Ahmed, thank you so much for joining Gaurav
Yeah.
and me to go component by component, part by part, to talk about how the future is being built. And it's been a real privilege to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks a ton.
Thank you both. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.